The doors of the private boardroom opened. Brandy Okoye stepped inside and froze. 12 executives sat silently around a long, polished table, but Brandy barely noticed them. Her eyes were fixed on the man sitting at the head of the room. For 7 weeks, she had known him as Fola, her housekeeper, the man who swept her floors, washed her plates, burned her favorite blouse while trying to iron it, the man she had laughed with, cried in front of, and slowly begun to trust with her heart. But there were no faded clothes now, no cheap sandals, no reading glasses. The man sitting before her wore an expensive charcoal suit. A luxury watch rested on his wrist, and behind him, large gold letters covered the wall. Kayode Group. Brandy's eyes filled with tears. A security officer beside the door spoke respectfully. "Good morning, Mr. Kayode." Brandy slowly turned back to Fola. Her voice trembled. "Who are you?" The man rose from his chair. "Brandy." She immediately stepped backwards. "Don't call my name." The entire boardroom went silent. "You lived inside my house. I can explain. You ate at my table." Ayo lowered his eyes. "I know. You listened while I told you things I have never told another man." Her voice began to break. Then she looked directly into his eyes. "Was any part of you real?" Ayo had no answer that could undo what he had done, because Fola had never existed. The housekeeper Brandy was falling in love with was actually Ayo Kayode, a billionaire, and the owner of the company that had been trying to take her family home. But Brandy was about to discover something even worse. Someone had been quietly destroying her life for months. And strangely, the billionaire who had lied his way into her home was not the person she needed to fear most. 7 weeks earlier. 7 weeks earlier. Brandy Okoye lived in an old cream-colored family house in Surulere, Lagos. It wasn't the biggest house on the street, and it certainly wasn't the newest. Some of the paint had begun to fade. One of the windows still had the same wooden frame her father installed almost 20 years ago. But to Brandy, that house was priceless. Her late mother had cooked there. Her father had raised his children there. And after losing both of them, the house became more than bricks and cement. It became the one place where Brandy could still feel close to them. It was also where she had started her catering business, Mama Ada's Kitchen. She had built it from almost nothing. And now, somebody wanted the land beneath it. That Tuesday morning, Brandy sat across the dining table from a sharply dressed man named Dipo Kayode. Dipo was an executive at the powerful Kayode Group, and this was not his first visit. He calmly placed a property document on the table. 48 million naira. Brandy looked at the document, then at him. "For my house." Dipo leaned back confidently. 50 million if you sign this week." Brandy pushed the document back toward him. "My answer was no last month." Dipo smiled, but there was something condescending behind it. "This is Lagos, Miss Okoye. 50 million naira is not an insult." Brandy remained calm. "You people keep making the same mistake." Dipo's smile faded slightly. "What mistake? You think because something has a price, everybody must want to sell it." Dipo studied her. "The entire row is being acquired for redevelopment. Then redevelop around me." For the first time, Dipo stopped smiling. "Your property is important to the project." Brandy leaned back in her chair. "It is more important to me." Dipo slowly gathered his documents. "At some point, sentiment becomes expensive." Brandy looked directly into his eyes. "And at some point, arrogance becomes irritating." Silence. Dipo stood. He adjusted his expensive suit and stared at her for several seconds. Then he walked out of the house without another word. Brandy thought that was the end of it. She had no idea that across Lagos, Dipo would soon tell his cousin about the stubborn woman in Surulere who had refused to sell. And when Ayo Kayode heard about Brandy Okoye, he became curious, very curious, because almost everyone Ayo had ever met wanted something from his money. But Brandy? She had just looked at 50 million naira and said no. 2 days later, Brandy attended a hospitality development conference on Victoria Island. She wasn't particularly interested in going, but her best friend and business manager, TT Adaran, had practically dragged her there. As they sat among some of Lagos's wealthiest business owners, TT leaned toward her. "You need clients." Brandy sighed. "I know." Then smile. "I am smiling." TT stared at her face. "No. You look like somebody owes you money." Brandy almost laughed. TT lowered her voice. "Please, behave yourself. There are rich people everywhere." Brandy looked around the luxurious hall. "I like rich people." TT raised an eyebrow. "Since when?" since I discovered they can afford my catering prices. TT covered her mouth to stop herself from laughing. Then suddenly, the atmosphere in the room changed. People began turning toward the entrance. Ayo Kayode had arrived, one of the most successful young businessmen in Nigeria. Luxury hotels, real estate, major investments, and, unfortunately for Brandy, the Kayode Group was also the company trying to buy her family home. Ayo moved through the room confidently, greeting executives and business owners. Then his eyes found Brandy. A few minutes later, he approached her table. Miss Okoye. Brandy looked up. Mr. Kayode. Ayo smiled. I've heard a lot about you. Brandy raised an eyebrow. That sounds threatening. TT quickly looked away before she started laughing again. Ayo chuckled. I heard you rejected our offer. I rejected 4. That caught his attention. You don't like money? Brandy smiled. I love money. Ayo looked genuinely confused. Then I'm confused. Brandy leaned slightly closer. I just don't love it enough to sell everything that matters to me. Ayo's smile slowly disappeared. Not because he was offended. Because for once, someone had surprised him. Most people changed when they heard the name Ayo Kayode. They became friendlier, more careful, more agreeable. Brandy did none of those things. And strangely, Ayo liked it. Their conversation continued for several minutes. Then, just before leaving, Ayo looked at her. Dinner sometime? Brandy answered immediately. No. Ayo blinked. No. Brandy calmly looked at him. Yes. That is usually what no means. TT nearly choked on her drink. Ayo stared at Brandy for a moment, then laughed. Good night, Miss Okoye. Good night, Mr. Kayode. As he walked away, TT turned to Brandy with wide eyes. Do you realize who you just rejected? Brandy picked up her drink. Yes. And I'm hungry. When are they serving food? TT shook her head. But across the room, Ayo looked back at Brandy one more time. He had entered that conference surrounded by people desperate for his attention. Yet the only woman he couldn't stop thinking about was the one who didn't seem to want it. That night, Ayo Kayode returned to his mansion in Banana Island. The house was enormous. 7 bedrooms, a private cinema, a swimming pool overlooking the Lagos waterfront. Expensive paintings covered the walls. Luxury cars sat quietly inside the compound. And several domestic workers were always available whenever he needed them. Ayo had everything most people dreamed of having. Yet that night, the mansion felt strangely empty. He loosened his tie and stood beside the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at the distant lights of Lagos. But his mind wasn't on business. It wasn't on money. And it certainly wasn't on the multi-million naira project waiting for his approval. His mind was on one woman, Brandy Okoye, especially the way she had looked directly into his eyes and rejected him without hesitation. Behind him, his mother, Dame Ayo Kayode, sat elegantly on one of the sofas. She had been watching her son quietly for several minutes. Finally, she spoke. A woman. Ayo turned. What makes you say that? Dame Ayo smiled knowingly. You have been staring at Lagos for 10 minutes. But somehow, I don't think you were seeing Lagos. Ayo laughed softly. He walked over and sat opposite her. Her name is Brandy. Dame Ayo raised an eyebrow. Brandy Okoye? Ayo looked surprised. You know her? The woman refusing to sell the Surulere property? Ayo smiled. News travels fast. His mother studied him, especially when my son asked questions about the same woman 3 times during dinner. Ayo looked away. She thinks men like me believe everything can be bought. Dame Ayo tilted her head. Do you? No. His mother simply stared at him. Ayo sighed. Fine. Not everything. Dame Ayo smiled. Good. Then leave the woman alone. Ayo looked at her. She rejected me before she even knew me. No, Ayo. She rejected dinner. Same difference. It is absolutely not the same difference. Ayo laughed. But his mother wasn't finished. If you truly like this woman, approach her honestly. Ayo became thoughtful. What if she only sees the name? What name? Kayode. He looked around the enormous mansion. The money. The company. All of this. Dame Adenike's expression softened. My son, the right woman cannot know you if you refuse to show her who you are. Ayo remained silent. His mother had given him good advice. Simple advice. Honest advice. Unfortunately, Ayo Kayode was about to do the exact opposite. Because before that night was over, an idea had entered his mind. A foolish idea. A dangerous idea. One that would bring him closer to Brandy than he ever imagined. but would eventually cost him the one thing money could never buy back: her trust. 3 days later, Brandy arrived at Mama Ada's kitchen expecting another busy morning. Instead, she found a problem that made her blood run cold. She sat at her desk, staring at her phone. "TT, come and see this." TT hurried over. "What happened?" Brandy turned the phone toward her. 6.8 million naira is missing. TT's expression changed immediately. "What?" "It was here yesterday." They checked the account again. 2 supplier payments had been redirected. A major catering order had suddenly been canceled, and the client's deposit had somehow been refunded into an account Brandy didn't recognize. TT pulled a chair closer. "Did you authorize any of this?" "No." "Does anybody else have access to the account?" "Only you and me." TT stared at the transactions. "Brandy, somebody did this deliberately." Brandy's confusion slowly became fear. Mama Ada's kitchen was everything she had spent years building. And now, within a few hours, someone had pushed the business dangerously close to collapse. Suppliers were calling. Staff salaries were approaching. And Brandy had no idea where her money had gone. That evening, she returned home exhausted. Her younger brother, Uchena, found her sitting at the dining table. "You look terrible." "Thank you. You know what I mean." Brandy sighed. 6.8 million disappeared from the business account. Ukena's expression changed for just a second. "How?" "I don't know." Then Brandy told him their elderly housekeeper also had to return to her village because she was ill. Uchena frowned. "So get somebody else." "With what money?" "You still need help. Sometimes you leave before sunrise and don't return until midnight." "I'll manage." "Brandy." She sighed. "Fine. TT knows a staffing agency. I'll ask her tomorrow." "Good." Brandy stood and walked toward her bedroom. The moment she disappeared, Ukena's expression changed. His phone vibrated. He looked down. A message had arrived. From Dipo Kayode. "We need to talk." Uchena stared at the message. Fear slowly appeared on his face. He glanced toward the hallway to make sure Brandy wasn't returning. Then, Uchena quickly locked the screen. Meanwhile, Ayo Kayode had discovered something interesting. Through one of his hospitality managers, he heard that Brandy was looking for a new housekeeper. That information should have meant absolutely nothing to a billionaire. But Ayo had already become fascinated by the woman who rejected both his company's money and his dinner invitation. Then a ridiculous idea entered his head. If Brandy would never give Ayo Kayode a chance, perhaps she would give an ordinary man one. So Ayo created Fola. The expensive watch disappeared. The designer suits were replaced with faded shirts and simple trousers. He put on cheap sandals and reading glasses. Even his perfectly trimmed beard was allowed to grow fuller. Standing before the mirror inside his luxurious bedroom, Ayo looked at himself. For the first time in years, he didn't look like a billionaire. Behind him, Dame Ayo Kayode stared at her son in disbelief. "Let me understand this properly." Ayo turned. "Mummy, you want to enter that woman's house, pretending to be her housekeeper? Only for a few days." His mother folded her arms. "Ayo, you own hotels. You have hundreds of employees. Yet somehow, becoming a housekeeper is the best idea you could find." Ayo almost smiled. "I just want her to know me without the Kayode name. Then introduce yourself without behaving like a billionaire. She already knows who I am." Dame Adenike shook her head. "My son, this is not romantic. It is deception." Ayo's smile disappeared. "I won't hurt her." "You cannot promise that." She stepped closer. "If she trusts Fola, while Fola does not even exist, what happens when she discovers Ayo?" Ayo remained silent. Dame Adenike looked directly into his eyes. A good intention does not turn a lie into truth. For a moment, Ayo seemed to understand. But the following morning, the billionaire left his mansion without his driver, without his expensive clothes, and without his real identity. Ayo Kayode was gone, and in his place was Fola. His mother had warned him. Ayo heard her. He simply did not listen. The following morning, Brandy heard a knock at the gate. When she opened it, a tall man stood outside carrying a small travel bag. Simple faded shirt, dark trousers, cheap sandals, reading glasses. Nothing about him looked like Ayo Kayode. At least, that was what Ayo hoped. Brandy studied him carefully. "You're Fola?" He nodded politely. "Yes, madam." Brandy frowned. "Please don't call me madam." "Brandy is fine." "Yes, madam." Brandy stared at him. Behind her, TT immediately became suspicious. She stepped forward and looked. Fola up and down as if she were interviewing a criminal suspect. You have experience? Yes. Cleaning? Yes. Cooking? Yes. TT narrowed her eyes. Laundry? Fola paused. Just a little too long. Yes. TT leaned closer. Why did that one take you so long? Fola cleared his throat. I was remembering all the experience. Brandy burst out laughing. She tried to stop herself, but couldn't. Even TT looked away to hide a smile. Fola stood there awkwardly, pretending to be embarrassed. But beneath the glasses and faded clothes, Ayo was watching Brandy. This wasn't the confident woman who had challenged him at the conference. This Brandy was relaxed, warm, beautiful, and completely unaware that a billionaire was standing at her gate, pretending he knew how to wash clothes. TT folded her arms. I'll be watching you. Fola nodded seriously. I understand. Brandy shook her head. TT, leave the poor man alone. She opened the gate wider. Come inside, Fola. And just like that, Ayo Kayode entered Brandy Okoye's home. He had planned to stay only long enough to understand the woman behind the stubbornness. But as Brandy walked ahead of him, still laughing at his ridiculous answer, Ayo smiled, because suddenly, he wanted to hear that laugh again. By the third day, Brandy discovered something important. Fola was terrible at his job. He could sweep and wash plates. But anything more complicated became a problem. That afternoon, Brandy found him standing nervously beside the ironing board. What happened? Nothing. Fola. He slowly lifted one of her favorite blouses. Brandy stared at it. What did you do? I ironed it. Then why does it look like that? Fola cleared his throat. The iron was very hot. Brandy folded her arms. It's an iron, Fola. That's how they work. He looked down. There may have been a small problem. Brandy took the blouse. Her eyes widened. Fola. He looked away. There is a hole. Silence. Brandy tried to stay angry, but one look at his embarrassed face, and she burst out laughing. You said you had experience. I do. Doing what? Destroying people's clothes. It is only one blouse. Brandy stopped laughing. One. Fola immediately became quiet. Fola, where are the others? Later that evening, they sat together on the veranda. Brandy was still teasing him when Fola suddenly said, You don't laugh enough. Her smile faded. Life doesn't give me many reasons. Your business. That. And everything else. She looked toward the quiet street. After my parents died, everyone expected me to be strong. So I became strong. Then her voice softened. But sometimes, I get tired. Ayo listened quietly. For a moment, he forgot he was pretending to be Fola. You don't always have to be strong, Brandy. She looked at him. With who? Ayo wanted to say, with me. But he couldn't, because Fola wasn't real. And as Brandy began trusting him, Ayo finally understood how dangerous his lie was becoming. That same night, after Brandy and Uchena had gone to bed, Ayo quietly entered his small guest room. He locked the door, then pulled a sleek laptop from beneath his clothes. Fola the housekeeper disappeared, and Ayo Kayode returned. For several nights, he had been secretly reviewing Kayode Group's records. Something about Dipo's desperation to acquire Brandy's property bothered him. The numbers didn't make sense. The Surrealure project could continue without her house. So why was Dipo so determined to get it? Ayo opened another file. Property agreements, bank transfers, consultancy payments. Then he noticed something strange. Several large payments had been approved through companies he didn't recognize. Ayo frowned. Who owns these companies? He searched deeper. The same names appeared again and again. And somehow, Dipo's department was connected to all of them. Then Ayo's phone rang. It was Dipo. He answered. Ayo, where have you been? Busy. For almost a week. Ayo leaned back. Is there a problem? Dipo laughed softly. No problem. I'm just wondering why my billionaire cousin suddenly disappeared. Ayo's eyes remained on the suspicious transactions. Then he asked casually, what happened with the Okoye property? A brief silence. Brandy will sell. She already said no. Dipo chuckled. Ayo, everybody has a number. Ayo's expression hardened. Not everybody. Give me time. The call ended. Ayo stared at the laptop. For the first time, his interest in Brandy's house had nothing to do with Brandy. Something was wrong inside Kayode Group, and Dipo knew more than he was saying. But across Lagos, Dipo was becoming suspicious too, because Ayo Kayode never disappeared without telling anyone. And now, Dipo was beginning to wonder exactly where his cousin had gone. A few days later, Brandy came home late in the evening. soaked from the Lagos rain. She had spent hours trying to save an important catering deal. It failed. Another client had pulled out without explanation. And with 6.8 million naira still missing, Brandy was exhausted. She entered the kitchen and found Fola standing beside a pot. He smiled. "I made dinner." Brandy looked inside the pot, then slowly looked at him. "What is this?" "Jollof rice." She stared at the food again. "Are you sure?" Fola frowned. "What does it look like?" Brandy finally smiled. "Evidence." "Evidence of what?" "That you should never be allowed near a kitchen again." Fola laughed. For a few seconds, Brandy forgot about her problems. Then her phone rang. Another supplier demanding payment. She ended the call and sat quietly at the kitchen table. Suddenly, tears filled her eyes. Fola's smile disappeared. "Brandy." She wiped her face quickly. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." "I said I'm fine." But the tears kept coming. "I don't even know why I'm crying." Fola pulled a chair closer. "Sometimes crying doesn't mean you're weak." Brandy looked at him. His voice softened. "Sometimes it means you have been strong longer than you should have been." Brandy said nothing. For once, someone wasn't asking her to solve a problem. He was simply there. Then suddenly, the electricity went out. The kitchen became dark. Brandy sighed. "Perfect." Fola laughed softly. "At least now you can't see my jollof." Brandy laughed through her tears. In the darkness, their hands touched on the table. Neither of them moved away. For several quiet seconds, they simply sat there. And Brandy realized something that frightened her more than she expected. She was beginning to trust Fola. But Ayo felt something even more dangerous. He was no longer pretending to care about Brandy. Somewhere between the burnt clothes, the terrible jollof, and those quiet conversations, he had started falling in love with her. The next afternoon, Brandy was arranging items in her shop when TT suddenly walked in. She looked unusually serious. "Brandy." Brandy glanced up. "What?" TT leaned closer. "That your housekeeper." Brandy sighed. "What has Fola done now?" "Nothing." "Then what?" TT lowered her voice. "I don't trust him." Brandy stared at her, then laughed. "TT, please. I am serious. You don't trust anybody. This one is different." Brandy shook her head and continued working. But TT wasn't finished. "Yesterday, I saw him looking at your generator." Brandy stopped. "My generator?" "Yes." "So?" TT frowned. "Which housekeeper looks at a generator like he wants to interview it?" Brandy burst out laughing. "TT, I am telling you what I saw. He was probably checking it." "Checking what?" Brandy shrugged. "Maybe he reads generators too." TT stared at her. Brandy laughed even harder. But TT didn't smile. "Brandy, that man is not ordinary." The laughter slowly disappeared from Brandy's face. "What exactly are you trying to say?" "I don't know yet." TT moved closer. "But watch him." Later that evening, Brandy sat on the veranda while Fola repaired a loose handle on one of the chairs. She watched him quietly. Normally, she would have teased him. But this time, she noticed something. His hands. They were clean. Too clean. No rough palms. No scars from years of hard labor. Even the way he held the screwdriver seemed unfamiliar. Brandy's smile slowly faded. For the first time, TT's ridiculous warning didn't seem quite so ridiculous. Brandy looked at Fola again, and a question quietly entered her mind. Who exactly was this man? 2 days later, Brandy was going through some old business documents when something caught her attention. A photocopy was missing, not just any document. The ownership papers for her late father's property. Brandy searched the drawer again. Nothing. Her expression changed. Only one other person knew where she kept those papers. Her cousin, Uchena. That evening, Uchena came to visit. Brandy watched him carefully. "Uchena." "Yes." "Did you take anything from my document drawer?" He answered too quickly. "No." Brandy's eyes narrowed. "I didn't tell you which document." Uchena froze. Only for a second. But Brandy noticed. "What are you accusing me of?" "I haven't accused you of anything." "Then why are you questioning me like a criminal?" Brandy remained calm. "Because one of my father's property documents is missing." Uchena looked away. "I don't know anything about it." "Are you sure?" His voice became sharper. "I said I don't know." Silence. Brandy stared at him. Uchena grabbed his phone. "I don't have time for this." Then he walked out. But Brandy's suspicion followed him through the door. Later that night, Uchena entered a quiet restaurant. A man was already waiting in the corner. Dipo. Uchena sat across from him. His hands were restless. "You said nobody would get hurt." Dipo didn't move. "Lower your voice." Uchena leaned forward. You told me you only needed a copy of the document. And you gave it to me. I thought it was only for a business loan. Silence. Dipo slowly looked at him. Uchena swallowed. I didn't know you were planning to take the property. Dipo's expression remained cold. You knew enough to take my money. Uchena looked down. That property belonged to my uncle. Your uncle is dead, and Brandy will never agree to sell it. Dipo leaned back calmly. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then a faint smile appeared on his face. Uchena looked at him nervously. You don't know Brandy. Once she makes up her mind, nobody can force her. Dipo's smile disappeared. His voice became quiet. Cold. Certain. She will sell it. A few days later, Brandy came home late in the evening, soaked from the Lagos rain. She had spent hours trying to save an important catering deal. It failed. Another client had pulled out without explanation. And with 6.8 million naira still missing, Brandy was exhausted. She entered the kitchen and found Fola standing beside a pot. He smiled. I made dinner. Brandy looked inside the pot, then slowly looked at him. What is this? Jollof rice. She stared at the food again. Are you sure? Fola frowned. What does it look like? Brandy finally smiled. Evidence. Evidence of what? That you should never be allowed near a kitchen again. Fola laughed. For a few seconds, Brandy forgot about her problems. Then her phone rang. Another supplier demanding payment. She ended the call and sat quietly at the kitchen table. Suddenly, tears filled her eyes. Fola's smile disappeared. Brandy. She wiped her face quickly. I'm fine. No, you're not. I said I'm fine. But the tears kept coming. I don't even know why I'm crying. Fola pulled a chair closer. Sometimes crying doesn't mean you're weak. Brandy looked at him. His voice softened. Sometimes it means you have been strong longer than you should have been. Brandy said nothing. For once, someone wasn't asking her to solve a problem. He was simply there. Then suddenly, the electricity went out. The kitchen became dark. Brandy sighed. Perfect. Fola laughed softly. At least now you can't see my jollof. Brandy laughed through her tears. In the darkness, their hands touched on the table. Neither of them moved away. For several quiet seconds, they simply sat there. And Brandy realized something that frightened her more than she expected. She was beginning to trust Fola. But Ayo felt something even more dangerous. He was no longer pretending to care about Brandy. Somewhere between the burnt clothes, the terrible jollof, and those quiet conversations, he had started falling in love with her. A few nights later, Brandy and Fola sat together on the veranda. The neighborhood was quiet. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Brandy suddenly asked, Fola, can I ask you something? Anything. She looked at him. Have you ever lied to someone? Because you were afraid of what would happen if they knew the truth. Ayo's body went still. Of all the questions she could have asked, she had chosen that one. Yes. Brandy turned toward him. What happened? Ayo looked away. I haven't told the person yet. Brandy smiled gently. Then tell them. Ayo swallowed. What if the truth makes them leave? Then at least they are leaving because they know the truth. Her answer hurt more than she realized. Ayo looked at her. What if the lie started for a good reason? Brandy shook her head. A good reason doesn't make it honest. Then she added quietly, tell the truth before it's too late. Why? Brandy looked directly into his eyes. Because lies grow. Ayo said nothing. She continued. One small lie becomes another. Then another. And before you know it, you're protecting the lie instead of protecting the person. Ayo's heart sank. This was his chance. He could tell her everything. That his name wasn't Fola. That he had never been a housekeeper. That the man sitting beside her was Ayo Kayode. He opened his mouth. Brandy, there's something I need to tell you. But before he could continue, Brandy gently rested her head against his shoulder. Ayo froze. Then slowly, he reached for her hand. Their fingers intertwined. Neither of them pulled away. For Brandy, it was a quiet moment of trust. For Ayo, it was beautiful and terrifying. Because the woman beside him was finally opening her heart. But she wasn't opening it to Ayo Kayode. She was opening it to Fola, a man who had never existed. And instead of telling her the truth, Ayo held her hand tighter. That night, Brandy believed she had finally found someone she could trust. She had no idea. She was falling in love with a man who did not exist. The following morning, Brandy heard a knock at the door. When she opened it, her expression immediately changed. Dipo Kayode stood outside. Expensive suit, polished shoes, and that same confident smile she had already learned to dislike. Brandy folded her arms. What do you want? Dipo held up a document. One final offer. I've already given you my final answer. Perhaps you should reconsider. I haven't. Dipo sighed. Brandy, this project is bigger than one house. And this house is bigger than your project to me. Before Dipo could answer, Fola walked into the hallway behind Brandy. Dipo looked past her and froze. For one brief moment, everything changed. Dipo stared at Fola. Fola stared back. Neither man spoke, but they recognized each other immediately. Dipo was looking directly at his cousin, Ayo Kayode. Except Ayo was standing inside Brandy's house, dressed like a housekeeper. Brandy noticed the silence. She looked at Dipo, then at Fola, then back at Dipo. Do you two know each other? No. Both men answered almost at the same time. Brandy's eyes narrowed. Dipo quickly smiled. Never seen him before. Fola nodded. Me neither. Brandy stared at them suspiciously. Something about the moment felt wrong. But Dipo calmly gathered his documents. I'll give you more time to think about the offer. Don't bother. Dipo smiled, then turned and walked toward the gate. But the moment his back was to Brandy, the smile disappeared. Everything suddenly made sense. Ayo's strange disappearance, his sudden interest in Brandy, his questions about the Surreal project. Dipo stopped beside his car and slowly looked back at the house. His cousin wasn't traveling. He wasn't attending secret business meetings. The billionaire owner of Kayode Group was hiding inside Brandy Okoye's home, pretending to be her housekeeper. And now, Dipo knew. For the first time since this game began, Dipo had something far more valuable than Brandy's property. He had Ayo Kayode's secret. That night, Ayo sat alone in his small room inside Brandy's house. His phone rang. Dipo. Ayo stared at the screen before answering. What do you want? Dipo laughed softly. Good evening. Fola. Ayo's face hardened. Leave Brandy out of this. Oh, relax. I must admit, cousin, the disguise is impressive. Ayo remained silent. Dipo continued. Does she know her housekeeper is worth billions? What do you want? Simple. Sign the final approval for the Surreal redevelopment tomorrow. No. Dipo chuckled. You should think carefully before answering. I said no. The amusement disappeared from Dipo's voice. Then perhaps Brandy deserves to know who has been sleeping under her roof. Ayo stood. Don't threaten me. I'm not threatening you. I'm giving you a choice. Dipo paused. Approve the project. And Fola continues to exist. Ayo's jaw tightened. And if I don't, I send Brandy everything. A photograph. A company record. One phone call. That was all Dipo needed to destroy Ayo's disguise. Ayo's voice became cold. You are blackmailing me? Silence. Then Dipo laughed quietly. I'm protecting the project. No. Ayo looked toward the laptop on his table. You're protecting something inside that project. For the first time, Dipo became quiet. Ayo continued. I've seen the numbers. Something is wrong. Dipo's voice changed. Be careful, cousin. Ayo lowered his voice. You should take your own advice. He ended the call. For several seconds, Ayo stood completely still. He could confess everything to Brandy, but without proof. Dipo could destroy her business, take her property, and disappear behind lawyers and company documents. Ayo opened his laptop. The disguise was no longer his biggest problem. He needed to discover what Dipo was hiding. And this time, suspicion wasn't enough. Ayo needed evidence. The following afternoon, Brandy went into Fola's room looking for a missing bedsheet. She wasn't searching through his things. At least, not at first. Then something beneath his pillow caught her attention. A wristwatch. Brandy picked it up. It was heavy, beautiful, and obviously expensive. Very expensive. That evening, Fola walked into the living room and stopped. Brandy was waiting for him. The watch was in her hand. Fola, his eyes immediately dropped to it. For the first time since entering her house, Ayo looked genuinely nervous. Brandy raised the watch. Whose is this? Mine. She frowned. Yours? Yes. Brandy examined it again. How much does a watch like this cost? Ayo hesitated. I don't know. You own it, but you don't know? It was a gift. From who? My former boss. Brandy stared at him. What kind of boss gives his housekeeper a watch like this? Ayo had no answer ready, and Brandy noticed. Then she remembered Dipo's strange reaction when he saw Fola. The way both men had answered too quickly. Fola's knowledge of business. His expensive watch. His hands. Suddenly, TT's suspicions didn't seem so ridiculous. Brandy slowly placed the watch on the table. Fola, look at me. Ayo raised his eyes. Is there something you're hiding from me? Silence. Brandy. No. She stepped closer. I trusted you. I know. Then tell me the truth. Ayo's heart pounded. Brandy stared directly into his eyes. A long silence passed. Then she asked, Who are you? Ayo opened his mouth. This was it. No more Fola. No more lies. Brandy, my real name is. The front door suddenly opened. Brandy. They both turned. Uchena stood in the doorway. His face was pale. His breathing was heavy. And several documents were trembling in his hands. Brandy, we have a problem. She stared at her brother, then slowly looked back at Fola. The truth had been seconds away. But once again, Ayo's secret survived. Uchena walked into the living room and placed several documents on the table. His hands were shaking. Brandy immediately forgot about Fola's watch. What happened? Uchena couldn't look at her. Brandy, I'm sorry. Her expression changed. Sorry for what? He pushed the documents toward her. Brandy picked them up. Loan agreements, property papers, and at the bottom, Ukena's signature. She read them again, then slowly looked at her brother. You signed this. Ukena's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know what it would become. Did you sign it? Yes. Brandy dropped the papers onto the table. You used our family house as collateral? I was desperate. For what? Uchena said nothing. Brandy stepped closer. For what, Uchena? His voice became almost a whisper. Betting. Silence. Brandy stared at him. How much? Uchena lowered his head. 15 million. Brandy looked as if she had heard him incorrectly. You gambled 15 million naira? I didn't start with 15 million. Then how? I kept losing. I borrowed more because I thought one win would fix everything. Brandy's anger slowly became heartbreak. You used the only thing Mummy and Daddy left us. Uchena began crying. I was ashamed. So you lied to me? I thought I could fix it before you found out. Brandy shook her head. You should have come to me. I couldn't. I'm your sister. I know. Uchena covered his face. I didn't want you to see me as a failure. Brandy looked away, fighting back tears. Near the doorway, Fola remained silent. Then Brandy looked at the documents again. Who gave you this loan? Uchena froze. Who, Uchena? He slowly raised his head. The man told me you would never lose the house. He said the documents were only temporary. Brandy's voice became quiet. What man? Uchena looked toward Fola, then back at his sister. Fear filled his face. Finally, he answered. Dipo Kayode. That night, Ayo knew the game was over. He could no longer remain inside Brandy's house pretending to be Fola. But before telling her the truth, he needed to know exactly what Dipo had done. Ayo locked himself inside his room and contacted someone he trusted at Kayode Group. Open a private investigation into the Surrelir project. The answer came quickly. How deep? Ayo stared at his laptop. Everything. Hours later, the first documents arrived. And what Ayo discovered was worse than he expected. Property agreements had been forged. Several owners who supposedly agreed to sell had never signed anything. Then came the bank records. Large amounts of money had disappeared into secret accounts. Ayo searched deeper. Those accounts led to shell companies. Companies with no real employees, no offices, no legitimate business. And somehow, they all led back to Dipo. But then Ayo opened one final transaction. He froze. Mama Ada's kitchen. The missing 6.8 million naira. It had passed through an account connected to one of Dipo's shell companies. Ayo stared at the screen in disbelief. Suddenly, everything made sense. The canceled catering contracts. The missing money. The pressure on Brandy to sell her house. None of it was bad luck. Dipo had deliberately damaged Brandy's business to make her desperate enough to sell. Ayo's anger turned cold. This was no longer about protecting his identity. It was about protecting Brandy. He gathered the evidence. Tomorrow, he would tell her everything. His real name, why he entered her house, and what Dipo had done. But Dipo moved first. The following morning, Brandy's phone vibrated. An anonymous message appeared. If you want to know who Fola really is, come to Kayode Tower, boardroom 19, 10 a.m. Below the message was a photograph. Fola, standing beside Ayo Kayode's private car. Brandy stared at it, then at Fola's expensive watch still lying on the table. She didn't confront him. She didn't call TT. She didn't ask another question. She simply got dressed and went to Victoria Island. At exactly 10 o'clock, Brandy entered Kayode Tower. She said very little at reception. The anonymous message had given her only one instruction. Boardroom 19. When the doors opened, Brandy stepped inside, and suddenly, everything from the photograph made sense. Executives sat silently around a long, polished table. At the head of that table was Fola, except there were no cheap clothes, no sandals, no reading glasses. He wore an expensive charcoal suit, and behind him, in large gold letters, were the words, Kayode Group. A security officer spoke respectfully. "Good morning, Mr. Kayode." Brandy froze. The man slowly stood. "Brandy." Her eyes filled with tears. "Don't call my name." Ayo stopped. Brandy looked around the room, then back at him. "You're Ayo Kayode?" He lowered his eyes. "Yes." "The Ayo Kayode?" "Yes." Her voice began to shake. "So Fola." Ayo swallowed. "Fola was me." Brandy laughed bitterly. "No. Fola was somebody you created. I never meant to hurt you. You entered my house using a fake name. I know. You ate with me. I know. I cried in front of you." Ayo's voice dropped. "I know. And you watched me fall for someone who wasn't real." "Brandy, my feelings were real." She stared at him through her tears. "Your feelings? What I felt for you was never a lie." Brandy shook her head. "Your name was a lie." Ayo said nothing. "Your job was a lie." Silence. "Your life was a lie." Ayo looked broken. "But my feelings weren't." Brandy laughed through her tears. "So all of it. Except everything." The boardroom became completely silent. Ayo stepped toward her. "I wanted you to know me without my money." "No." Brandy stepped backwards. "You wanted to know whether I would love you without your money." Ayo froze. She finally understood what hurt the most. "You weren't just hiding from me, Ayo." Her voice broke. "You were testing me." Ayo couldn't answer. Brandy wiped the tears from her face. "You wanted to see if I was good enough to love the poor version of you, before you trusted me with the rich one." Ayo opened his mouth, but nothing came out, because somewhere inside all his excuses, Brandy had found the truth. And this time, silence was the only answer Ayo Kayode had left. Before Brandy could leave the boardroom, the doors opened. Dipo Kayode walked in. He looked around the room, then smiled. What a touching reunion. Brandy turned toward him. Dipo looked at Ayo. "So, she finally knows." Ayo's expression hardened. "Sit down, Dipo." Dipo laughed. "I don't think you're in a position to give orders today." Then he looked at Brandy. "You should ask your boyfriend why his company destroyed your business." Brandy's face changed. She slowly turned toward Ayo. "What is he talking about?" Ayo didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened a file on the table. "My company didn't destroy your business." He looked directly at Dipo. "Dipo did." Dipo's smile faded. Ayo placed the first document on the table. Forged property agreements. Another document. Secret bank accounts. Then another. Shell companies used to move money out of Kayode Group. Dipo's confidence began to disappear. "You can't prove I authorized any of this." Ayo placed one final document down. "And the 6.8 million naira stolen from Mama Ada's kitchen." Brandy stared at the document. Her face went pale. Ayo continued. "It passed through an account connected to one of Dipo's companies." Brandy looked at Dipo. "You stole my money?" Dipo shook his head. "This proves nothing." Ayo stepped closer. "You damaged her business deliberately. Because you wanted her. Desperate enough to sell the house." Dipo's expression turned cold. "You have no evidence that I ordered that." Then, a voice came from the doorway. "I can prove it." Everyone turned. Uchena stood there. His face was pale. His phone was trembling in his hand. Dipo stared at him. "You?" Uchena swallowed. "I knew one day you would deny everything." He raised his phone. "So I recorded our conversations." Dipo's face changed completely. Uchena pressed play. Dipo's own voice filled the silent boardroom. "Your sister doesn't have to lose the house. She only has to become desperate enough to sell it." Silence. No smile remained on Dipo's face. No explanation could erase what everyone had just heard. But Brandy didn't feel victorious. She looked at Uchena, then at Dipo, finally, at Ayo. 3 men, 3 secrets. And somehow, she had been standing in the middle of all of them. Her brother had betrayed her for money, and the man she loved had betrayed her for love. Different reasons. Same wound. Brandy walked out of Kayode Tower without looking back. Outside, Lagos continued as if nothing had happened. Cars moved through the busy street. People hurried past. But Brandy barely noticed any of it. Her heart felt heavy. Behind her, the glass doors opened. "Brandy." Ayo followed her outside. She stopped, but didn't turn around. "Please," he said. "Just let me explain." Brandy slowly faced him. There was no anger left in her eyes. Only exhaustion. What else is there to explain? Ayo stepped closer. I was wrong. Yes. I should have told you the truth. Yes. I never wanted to hurt you. Brandy gave a sad smile. But you did. Ayo's voice softened. I love you. Brandy looked away. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she whispered, that is what makes it worse. Ayo froze. You could have approached me as yourself. You already hated everything my name represented. Brandy looked directly at him. Then you should have allowed me to hate you honestly. Ayo had no answer. She continued quietly. You took away my choice. I was afraid you would reject me. And maybe I would have. Her eyes filled with tears again. But that decision belonged to me, Ayo. Ayo lowered his head. Let me fix this. Brandy shook her head. That is your problem. He looked up. You think because you have money and power, everything broken is waiting for you to fix it. Brandy, I need time. Ayo stopped. She turned toward the road, then paused. And Uchena? He's cooperating with the investigation. Brandy closed her eyes briefly. He's still my brother. I know. But right now, I can't even look at him. She walked away. This time, Ayo didn't follow. He simply stood outside the enormous glass tower bearing his family's name and watched the woman he loved leave him behind. Ayo Kayode had spent his entire life solving problems with influence, connections, and money. But now, the billionaire had finally found something money could not fix. The truth spread quickly. Within days, Kayode Group opened a full investigation into the Betrayal project. And this time, Dipo had nowhere to hide. The forged documents were traced back to him. The secret accounts were uncovered. And Uchena's recordings confirmed what Dipo had been planning. Dipo Kayode was removed from the company. Soon after, he was facing charges for fraud, forgery, and financial misconduct. But for Brandy, there was finally some good news. The 6.8 million naira stolen from Mama Ada's kitchen was recovered. The false claim against her family home was canceled. For the first time in months, Brandy could breathe again. But Ayo wasn't finished. He ordered the entire Betrayal acquisition reviewed. Any property obtained through pressure or forged documents would be returned. Then he did something his board didn't expect. He canceled the plan to acquire Brandy's family home completely. The decision cost Kayode Group money. Some investors complained, but Ayo refused to change his mind. One evening, Dame Adenike visited him in his office. She found her son sitting quietly beside the cancellation documents. Are you doing all this because you think Brandy will come back? Ayo shook his head. No. Then why? He looked at the papers. Because it is the right thing to do. Dame Adenike studied him for a moment. Then a small smile appeared. Good. Ayo looked at her. She continued calmly. At least something useful came out of you becoming a housekeeper. Ayo stared at his mother. Then, for the first time in weeks, he laughed. It wasn't a big laugh, but it was real. Dame Adenike smiled. Ayo had lost Brandy's trust, and he knew correcting his company's wrongdoing would not automatically bring her back. For once, he wasn't trying to buy forgiveness. He was simply trying to become the man he should have been from the beginning. 3 months passed. Brandy slowly rebuilt Mama Ada's kitchen. The stolen money had been recovered. Her family home was safe, but some wounds were harder to repair. Uchena had moved out. He found work with a logistics company and began getting help for his gambling problem. But Brandy barely spoke to him. Then one quiet Sunday afternoon, she found him sitting outside the family gate. He looked thinner, tired, and somehow older. Brandy stopped. What are you doing here? Uchena stood slowly. I wanted to see you. She remained guarded. You've seen me. He nodded. I know you're still angry. Brandy looked away. Uchena continued softly. I'm not here to ask you to forgive me today. That made her look at him. I just need you to know that I'm sorry. Silence. I kept thinking I could win the money back before you found out. Brandy shook her head. You almost cost us our parents' house. I know. You lied to me. I know. Why didn't you come to me, Uchena? His eyes filled with tears. Because I was ashamed. Brandy's expression softened slightly. I wanted you to think I was doing well. You are my brother. I know. You didn't have to impress me. Uchena lowered his head. Brandy's voice became emotional. I would rather have a broke brother than a dishonest one. Uchena wiped his eyes. I understand that now. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Brandy sat beside him. Uchena looked at her. She didn't hug him. She didn't say everything was forgiven. Some betrayals were too painful for that. But when Uchena remained beside her, Brandy didn't ask him to leave. And sometimes, forgiveness doesn't begin with an apology being accepted. Sometimes, it begins when someone is finally allowed to stay. 6 months after Ayo walked out of Brandy's life, Mama Ada's kitchen finally opened its first proper restaurant. It wasn't a luxury restaurant. There were no gold walls or expensive chandeliers. Just a beautiful, welcoming space filled with the smell of good food and photographs of Brandy's parents. For Brandy, it was enough. On opening day, the restaurant was full. Brandy stood near the counter while TT arranged flowers by the entrance. Suddenly, TT froze. "Brandy, what? Don't look now." Brandy immediately turned around. TT sighed. "That's literally the opposite of what I said." Standing outside the restaurant was Ayo Kayode. No expensive suit, no security, no disguise, just Ayo. A simple white shirt, dark trousers, and an expression Brandy had never seen on him before. Nervousness. TT folded her arms. "Should I pour soup on him?" Brandy almost smiled. "No. Water. No. Small stew." "TT, I'm only asking." Brandy shook her head and walked outside. For several seconds, she and Ayo simply looked at each other. Finally, Brandy spoke. "You came." Ayo nodded. "You invited Kayode Group." "The company?" "Yes." "Not you." "I know." Brandy folded her arms. "Then why are you here?" Ayo looked toward the restaurant. "To buy food." Brandy raised an eyebrow. "With money?" Ayo smiled nervously. "Yes." "Your own money?" "Unfortunately." Brandy tried to hold it back, but she laughed. A small, genuine laugh. Ayo smiled. He didn't step closer. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He simply stood there. For once, he wasn't trying to control what happened next. And Brandy noticed. That laugh didn't mean she had forgotten what he did. It didn't mean everything was forgiven. But after 6 months of silence, the wall between them had finally developed. One small crack. Ayo and Brandy did not suddenly become lovers again. There were no expensive gifts, no dramatic proposal, no billionaire arriving with a new mansion. Ayo simply started showing up as himself, sometimes for lunch at Mama Ada's kitchen, sometimes just to talk. And slowly, Brandy allowed herself to know the man behind both Ayo Kayode and Fola. Months later, they sat together on the veranda of her Surreal home, the same house Ayo had once entered pretending to be a housekeeper. Brandy looked at him and smiled. "Do you know something?" "What?" "You were genuinely the worst housekeeper I have ever seen." Ayo laughed. "I was improving." "You burned my blouse." "One blouse." Brandy raised an eyebrow. "Should we discuss the others?" Ayo became quiet. She laughed. "And that jollof rice." "There was nothing wrong with my jollof." "Ayo, even hunger rejected that rice." He laughed. For a moment, everything felt easy. Then Brandy became serious. "Ayo, yes. If you had approached me as yourself from the beginning, I probably would have rejected you." "I know, but at least the choice would have been mine." Ayo's smile disappeared. He nodded. "I understand that now." Brandy looked at him. "Love doesn't give you permission to manipulate someone into choosing you." "No. And money doesn't give you permission to decide what is best for everybody." "No." She reached for his hand. Ayo gently held hers. Brandy smiled. "No more disguises." Ayo looked into her eyes. Never again. Their story survived. Not because Ayo was a billionaire, and not because Brandy simply forgot what he had done. It survived because trust was rebuilt slowly. With honesty, Uchena learned that hiding a mistake can turn one bad decision into something far worse. Ayo learned that even good intentions can hurt people when you take away their right to choose. And Brandy learned that forgiveness doesn't mean pretending betrayal never happened. Sometimes, it simply means believing that a person can become better than the mistake they made. But now, the question is yours. Who betrayed Brandy more? Uchena, the brother who risked their family home because of gambling? Or Ayo, the billionaire who entered her life under a false identity because he wanted her love? And if you were Brandy, would you have taken Ayo back? Tell me what you would have done in the comments. And if this story kept you watching until the end, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. For more powerful African stories about love, betrayal, secrets, and second chances, kindly click on the subscribe button.